Hello.
Hello
Hello.
and welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes. Welcome to Two Girls, One Garbage Can, the podcast where we explore the garbage can state of Australian politics through the lens of what has come before. I am one of your hosts, Tamara.
I am Maddie. With all of that said, we now have the state of workers' rights and the temperature of worker to political relations in Australia established. Onwards to the coal strikes. As I said earlier, during World War II, workers were urged to go into battle to meet the increased wartime production targets. There was a sense that those who made sacrifices would be rewarded after the war ended. Germany surrendered in May of 1945, and in July, Prime Minister John Curtin died, which brought Ben Chifley to the office. The Japanese surrender in September finally brought the war to an end, but as the transition to peace unfolded and the troops were demobilised, Chifley maintained many of the economic strictures of the war. Workers soon realised that they would need to fight to get their rewards, and they began to take strike action. This resulted in reforms to annual leave in 1945 and a removal of the wage freeze for metal workers in 1946. Then in 1947, the Conciliation and Arbitration Court called for a 40-hour work week. Bit more context on that coming. In 1947, coal miners began pushing for a 35-hour work week, long service leave as a normal condition of employment, and a 30 shilling or $109 a week in today's money pay rise. In response to this, the Joint Coal Board advanced a plan from coal mine owners that called for a tiered bonus system rather than a straight pay rise, mechanical extraction of pillar coal, thus eliminating jobs, the elimination of compulsory retirement at 60, which would make them have to pay retirement to their workers, the elimination of pit-top union meetings. I'm going to do that last bit again because I got sidetracked with Tamara making their fun noises.
Sorry.
Now it's me getting flustered.
That was like, I was actually speechless. I was trying to, I couldn't. Which is how I.
Yeah. No, I figured what was happening.
That is how I sound, after other things have happened too. You are making the correct correlations there. So.
It's the way you sound whenever you get flustered when I flirt with you, so I just assume it extends to everything else.
Yeah.
You know?
It's the flustered sound. It's the one.
Yeah.
The autistic reaction. You only have one reaction for every situation.
It just carries over. It changes occasionally in pitch and speed.
She was having
tempo.
a stronk. Oh my god. Just a little strong. Yeah. All right. Muting. Go.
Alrighty. So, in response to this, the Joint Coal Board advanced a plan from coal mine owners that called for a tiered bonus system rather than a straight pay rise, the mechanical extraction of pillar coal, thus eliminating jobs, the elimination of compulsory retirement at 60, the elimination of pit-top union meetings, and the matter of working hours to be referred back to the tribunal. If these conditions were accepted, then the coal mine owners would agree in principle to long service leave. So basically the coal mine owners said, well, if you want long service leave, you give up the pay rises and we'll make it tiered bonus systems so that you'll never hit. We'll get rid of a few jobs by doing a manual extraction of coal in some instances. You won't be able to retire at 60. You won't be able to have union meetings on site. And the thing about the 35-hour work week, that'll go back into arbitration for like 4 years. So yeah, that was all everything they expected the workers to give up to get long service leave. Now, at this time, it should be noted that the chair of the Joint Coal Board was a former mine manager, and there was no representative for mine workers on the board. So this is why the Joint Coal Board, I am having a really hard time saying that. This is why the Joint Coal Board seemed to push the ideas of mine owners rather than something that was equitable between owners and workers. In June of 1949, when the miners began to fear that their claims were about to be rejected by the Coal Industry Tribunal, which had been set up by Chifley's government in 1946 in order to deal with disputes between workers and owners, they began to hold stop-work meetings. The Joint Coal Board, also established by Chifley in 46 to regulate and supervise the coal industry, claimed the stop-work meetings were illegal and withheld a draft proposal for a new award that addressed some of the union's claims. The Unionists voted by an overwhelming majority of 7,995 to 822 to go on strike on June 27th if a deal could not be struck. On the 26th of June 1949, miners met with the heads of the Joint Coal Board to see if they could negotiate some way of avoiding strike action that had been planned for the next day, but proposals submitted by the mining unions were rejected and the strike was called. Thus, on the 27th of June 1949, 23,000 coal miners across the country downed tools and walked off the job.
Good on them.
It would bring much of the country to a standstill and push Prime Minister Ben Chifley into taking extreme steps to end the strike and to punish its ringleaders. His actions damaged not only his personal reputation, but also that of the Labour Party, and it led to a rout at the subsequent election. Prime Minister Ben Chifley took the strike action as an opportunity to lay the blame at the feet of the small percentage of communists within the Miners' Federation. However, it is clear from the voting that both the action and the demands had overwhelming member support. During this time, the Prime Minister used government budgets to take out full-page advertisements in all major newspapers within the Commonwealth of Australia, claiming that the coal strikes had nothing to do with the workers' rights and everything to do with communist agitation from within the unions. He also claimed within these adverts that the Coal Industry Tribunal had been set to affirm all of the demands of the workers before the strike action was called. So he blatantly lied. This was done in order to confuse the public about the reasons for the strike and to sway public opinion against the Communist Party of Australia, which in the post-World War II era had seen its largest growth in party membership and was now sitting at over 22,000 members.
And again, is it reminding you of the rhetoric that's being spread about unions today, that the Labour Party have decided that they, and again, it's because of profit. It's 100% for the sake of profiting private corporations. And,
absolutely.
I'm glad. I'm so glad other people are talking about this because I know I've been talking about it.
Yep. Sorry, mate. I know I'm getting you heated because this is a topic that you specifically care about.
I know.
And I knew this would get you heated.
I've got my sewing here. I'm going to sit here and try and do something with my hands so that I stop getting you.
In our last episode, you got me hella heated. So in fairness, turnabout's fair play.
That is true. That is true. I did make you sit through hours and hours of racist bullshit. So it makes sense that
to the point that chat sort of must have seen it in my face and was like, "Oh shit, Maddie's about to burn something down."
Yeah. Makes sense.
I have been told that it is very obvious when I get actually angry because my face goes real dark.
Yeah. Oh, fair enough. Okay. Woo! Okay.
So, Prime Minister Ben Chifley was a strong proponent of McCarthyism-style Red Scare rhetoric.
Yeah.
He used the Commonwealth Investigation Service, which is the predecessor of ASIO, to spy on and report on the activities and policies of Communist Party of Australia members and politicians. Now, by the time miners went out on strike, coal shortages were already being felt across the country, and due to the strike action, they subsequently became much worse. Electricity was rationed, so electric trains and trams could only run intermittent services, which affected industries that depended on commuters turning up on time. Shipping was affected due to wharfies being unable to make it to the docks because of disruptions to transport. Heavy industries that were reliant on coal also came to a standstill. While some of the members of the public sympathised with the miners, the harsh winter, on top of all of the other inconveniences they were enduring and Labour propaganda, soon turned many people hostile. On the 29th of June 1949, just 2 days after the strike began, the federal Labour government passed legislation that made it illegal to give financial support to striking workers and their families, including credit notes from shops. So in 2 days, they drafted and passed legislation that meant that workers who were on strike couldn't even get a loan from a friend to buy groceries from their family because the action of giving the loan was illegal.
Do you know what this is sounding a lot like? Has anyone ever read Whose Names Are Unknown by Sonora Babs?
No, I haven't.
No? The Grapes of Wrath tells about the Dust Bowl crisis. Sonora Babs, Whose Names Are Unknown, same thing. But she follows this one family as they go through this issue. And the same thing, like they go on strike against these unfair conditions. And the same sort of laws are passed. And you've got literal children coming home from school to eat pepper soup for dinner because that's all.
Yep. I mean, I understand the growing up poor thing. I went shopping the other day to buy some more rice because my container that I keep my rice in had run low, and I finished pouring the rice into this container, and I got this really weird warm, happy feeling in my chest, and I had to sit and analyze where that came from. And it was like, oh shit, that's right. Back when I was 16, 17 and had left home because it wasn't a great environment, and was living by myself for the first time, a full rice container meant that there'd be a couple of months before I'd potentially starve to death.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, it was just oh good, I'm safe that I was feeling, which was really weird.
And that's the thing that people sort of we sit there and we say we're doing all of this stuff for, the argument would be we're doing this for Australian families. We're doing it for those Australian families who are freezing in winter. Okay, but these are Australian families that you are starving out in the middle of winter as well. You're freezing them out in the middle of winter, and you're not even allowing their friends and family to help them. You're stripping community from them. And this is what whenever anyone says, oh, they try and protect the guns in America, I'm just like, you guys are so focused on the guns. And this is what they did. They made it about the guns and everyone forgot about the newspapers. Everyone forgot about the information. Everyone forgot about the airways. And this is what they do constantly. They make... They change what the issue is about in order to change how the public react to it. And this is why I keep saying to everyone, I don't give a shit what they find out about the CFMEU. I will always be on the side of the workers and the workers' union. End of story. Because why aren't we doing investigations into the corruption of what the government are into? Why do we still not have a functioning federal ICAC that we were promised before the last federal election? If we're going to put the CFMEU into administration because of possible criminal collaboration, why can't we put our government into administration because of definite criminal collaboration?
Yep.
Because they've said that they won't arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, and Pete Dutton met with him and he has been declared a war criminal.
Yep. On the 29th of June, the legislation was passed to make it illegal to give financial support to workers and their families. So, and their families, by the by.
And their families.
Yep.
So their wives
a week later,
couldn't come
on July the 5th. Yeah, and during winter, when there were electricity rations. So a week later, on July the 5th, union officials were ordered to hand over union funds to the Industrial Registrar, I should say. And the very next day, union leaders and officials were arrested and at the involved union headquarters. plus the Union headquarters and the Communist Party of Australia headquarters were raided by the Prime Minister.
Oh, of course
Or
they were.
were raided by the AFP, I should say, with the Prime Minister demanding that police find evidence of the strikes being a plot that was cooked up by the CPA. By the end of July, 7 union officials had been sentenced to 12 months imprisonment and an eighth to 6 months for the crime of contempt due to their refusal to inform on internal union affairs. Large fines were imposed upon other union officials and on 3 unions as a whole.
Always side with the union, guys. Always, 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 always side with the union. Always, never forget. Never forget, always side with the union. Never forget, always side with the union. Never forget.
Yep. Now, I did find some anecdotal evidence at this point that the contempt cases weren't actual trials.
Yeah, of course.
It was the AFP demanding that the union officials gave up information on the internal runnings of unions and their links to communism.
And
The union
didn't have
officials
any.
refusing to give up the information, and a judge finding them in contempt and imprisoning them to 12 months with zero defence.
Yeah.
So now all I found was the anecdotal evidence. I don't have any proof of that. So I am circling that by saying it was anecdotal.
But I will tell you that I know of several cases, and I can give you several cases that have happened in the last 10 years in Australia of people being imprisoned and charged and going to trial with their lawyer not being given the evidence that was being used against them to charge them, and they are now in prison, serving life in prison while not being given access to the evidence that was used to imprison them. So we know that that's happening right now in this country. No surprises there.
Alrighty. So when I last was speaking about this, I was mentioning that by the end of July in 1949, 7 union officials had been sentenced to 12 months imprisonment and an eighth to 6 months for the crime of contempt due to their refusal to inform on internal union affairs. Large fines were imposed upon other union officials and on 3 unions themselves. On the 28th of July, Ben Chifley mobilised 2,500 Australian Army soldiers to reopen 3 coal mines in New South Wales, with 7 more fields reopened by the Army later that week. In justifying his actions, Ben Chifley told the Labor caucus that the Reds must be taught a lesson. 2 weeks later, on August the 15th, the strike broke, having lasted 7 weeks. This act marked the first time that the Australian military forces had been used to break an Australian strike action, and it set a precedent that future governments would use to break other strikes in the future using defence personnel. More on this later. In early August, a senior right-wing Labor minister named Arthur Calwell boasted in a speech that the federal Labor government had unloaded the Haligonian Duke, which referenced an incident from a week before at the end of July in 49, in which the Federal Labor Party had aided the Victorian Liberal Party in unloading a ship full of coal using the Royal Navy. The ship had been declared a black shipment due to Canadian Maritime Union advising Australia's Maritime Union that the ship was staffed with non-union workers and had crossed a picket line. During the exact same speech, Calwell stated that union leaders and the communists within their ranks should be rounded up and put in concentration camps. Keep in mind that this was just 5 years on from the end of World War II, with the horrors of concentration camps fresh in the mind of most decent people. Now, the final things of note in
I just would like
this...
to point out, though,
Yep.
that we had concentration camps in this country at that time, though,
Yeah.
for Indigenous people throughout this entire
Yeah.
period.
And anybody of Japanese indigeneity.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
In internment camps during World War II.
yeah. So
yeah, we did have them.
yeah,
Yeah.
we still had them in this country for Indigenous people during this time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yay!
And Italians, you're right, Ed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So the final things of note from what I've researched for this episode are that following the events of the coal strikes and the military used to break them, the military was then subsequently used to break strikes under Robert Menzies, who took over after Ben Chifley was dumped. They were used in 1951, 52, 53, and 54 to break strikes. Harold Holt used them in 1967, Malcolm Fraser in 81, and finally by Bob Hawke in 1989. So it literally set a precedent for using the military to break strikes.
Yeah.
The last thing of note on the coal strikes themselves, early in the strike, the legality of using troops was investigated and planning immediately formulated for Operation Excavate, potentially as early as the first week in July, which is using the military to break the strikes.
So they had no intention of negotiating. They went straight to finding an alternative.
Within the first week of July, they were investigating
it.
Yeah. On the 14th of July, the government was said to be on the point of enlisting the support of the anti-communist Australian Workers' Union to break the strike, with an agreement from the Australian Railways Union, likewise at the time anti-communist, to transport the coal. The coal.
Can I just say, though, what the actual fuck, Railway Workers Union?
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck?
Yep.
Where'd you get off? Oh, my God almighty. I just want to point out the similarities between what's going on right now with the fucking union. Though I will say the Maritime Union, again, likewise, not, I was going to say, obviously, but the Maritime Union of Australia are standing very much with the CFMEU, so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and in history, the Maritime Union refused to unload a ship because they had been told by the Canadian Maritime Union that had broken a picket line. So they went, it's not even our strike.
Nah.
And we won't unload it.
Absolutely.
So they've always stood on point.
Absolutely. If you go and block the docks, the Maritime Union won't cross it. They won't cross a picket line.
Absolutely.
So if you go and block the docks to get shipments barred from anywhere, the Maritime Union will not cross the picket line. And we saw that recently.
Yep. We saw that recently. They refused to cross the picket.
Absolutely. They will not. The Maritime Union, absolutely. And that is why I will always I love the Maritime Union with all my heart, because
100%.
they get fucking solidarity. They fucking get it.
They understand it.
Yeah.
So it appears that the negotiations with the AWU and the Australian Railways Union amounted to a bluff and a political ploy to distract attention from the military operations that were being planned. According to the historian Philip Deary, with 1949 being an election year, Chifley wanted to demonstrate his government's anti-communist resolve. The tactics proved insufficient, as 2 months after the resolution of the strike, a general election was called, and come December of 1949, the newly formed Liberal Party, under the leadership of Robert Pig-Eye and Bob Menzies, was elected. The Labor would not see federal political office for 23 years after this.
Serves them fucking right.
Okay, so what does all of this mean for today?
Has anyone been paying attention to the union busting laws that have been going in recently and criminalising strike action?
Yep. Well, federal Labor has proven time and time again that it is no friend to the working class. Yeah. Take this most recent election. Labor ran on a platform of status quo and carrying on Liberal Party policies, such as Stage 3 tax cuts that saw massive benefits go to the highest wage earners, while people on lower salaries went backwards due to the dissolving of the LMITO, or low and middle income tax offset. And they only altered their policy to be slightly fairer to low income earners, despite still not making up for the loss of the LMITO after the Greens forced them into making changes. Labor has sat on its hands as corporate profits have continued to soar and workers' wages have gone backwards. And despite knowing that the source of inflation has nothing to do with the spending by the public and everything to do with the obscene profit grabbing by corporate entities, they've done nothing but hold a costly royal commission. They've ignored the housing crisis, which affects the lower classes of Australian society disproportionately, and originally planned to offer only a stock market gamble in the form of the Housing Australia Future Fund that would have tied any construction of public housing directly to stock market performance and thus to the military-industrial complex, and again only capitulated to providing direct investment at the assistance of the Greens. Federal Labor continues to pay mining companies significant grants and refuse to tax them, while they dig up mineral resources to sell overseas for a private profit, and have granted new mines to open in clear breach of their stated climate goals at the time of the election. Government continues its blind support of a genocidal nation despite the overwhelming will of the people, and then boasts publicly about refusing over 7,000 visas for people fleeing from the destruction. And then we have the blocking of the CFMEU and the gutting of that union. Now, look, I could go on, but I will be here all day. Suffice it to say that every move that federal Labor makes seems to be entirely tied into enriching the wealthiest people in Australia and overseas. And they seem to not give a single speck of a fuck about the people who live paycheck to paycheck, who can no longer afford a roof over their heads or food in their bellies. And with that slightly depressing note, our story for the day ends. I do have some more information about Fred Patterson, the only communist ever elected to the Australian Parliament, if you want to hear about it. He was a fascinating guy, and it would make for a nice palate cleanser after that rant.
I think we should have that as an episode. I definitely think we should have that as a separate episode, because I want to hear all about him. He sounds absolutely fascinating. And
cool.
Yes, I definitely am all for that. just as a little finishing note on that, I just think the thing that frustrates me so much is that whenever we point out, I remember, after the last election when we were all so upset that the Liberal Party might get another term, and we were panicking and freaking out, and I kept begging people not to vote for the Liberal Party. And that just seemed like the only thing that mattered at the time was just not voting for the Liberal Party. And in a lot of ways it was, so don't get me wrong, but as soon as the election was over and I started pointing out and criticising the Labor Party, all I had was a whole bunch of people telling me, yeah, well, you begged us not to vote for the Liberal Party 5 minutes ago. And I was like, so the only thing we're allowed is the lesser of two evils. We're not allowed to improve. We're not allowed to ask for better. We're not allowed to try. And again, we see throughout history, they've criminalized the very people that we set up to try and help improve things, to try and help drive for better conditions for the working class. We criminalize that behavior. And I can't fathom why the average Aussie doesn't get how it's not in their best interest to be okay with this. Time and time again, we see it.
It is mind-boggling that Australian voters continue to not realise how thoroughly the wool has been pulled over their eyes in relation to 100%. This misinformed belief that Labor actually supports working class people.
Gives a shit
about it. It's unreal. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us for this week's dive into the depths of the trash fire that is Australian politics. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, make sure to drop us a follow and do all of the usual engagement things to help us get the word out there. You can find Tamara and myself on social media links in the description below, but for now, it's garbage day, so the girls got to take the trash out. Bye.
Bye!